language is not built to withstand an attack by sophists. If we are forced to engage sophists on their territory, we will not be able to govern ourselves. We will not be able to figure out what we think is even taking place. And we're now seeing this, right? Because the point is, there are certain rules that obligate you, right? Social rules, etiquette rules that obligate you to engage things, right? And
the truth must be somewhere in the middle.
But the point is, it doesn't work. And
right.
Science also. So, at the point that Katanji Brown Jackson says that she's not a biologist. Katanji Brown Jackson says she's not a biologist. She is actually deferring to something that itself can't agree. And it's not because it's ambiguous. It's because the social pressure not to accept a simple definition for woman.
Wait, what do you mean? She's referring to something.
She's deferring to biologists, saying this is a question for biologists. We know why she did that. She knows it's a minefield, right?
Well, but I mean, so I have more to say about what is actually going on with regard to sex in organisms, but I get that when you have been called up by the president to potentially be the next sitting justice on SCOTUS on the Supreme Court, you are going to hedge and not answer, and that's what they do, right? Like that is what happens. But in this case, the people who are presumably gunning for her, like the people who are arguing that sex is a fiction and in your head and you can just transition whenever you want to, those are the people on her team, on what we used to call our team.
Right.
Those aren't the people who are going to overturn the nomination.
No. I don't think that was the purpose of this question. I think the purpose of this question.
But she doesn't need as I understand it, one of the amazing truths of the Supreme Court of the United States is that once you are a sitting justice, your team has no sway.
Right.
Your team has no sway, and her team appointed her because your team would appoint you. And her team is the one, former team, I don't even know what, Team Blue are exactly the people who are at least pretending to be confused on this front. There's a tiny number of people who are legitimately confused, and I'm sorry for them, and I wish we could unconfuse you. But most of y'all are just pretending to be confused. And she, with her past, with all of her wisdom and education, and I trust that she has actually been educated, and she actually knows a lot about the world, knows damn well what a woman is.
Of course, we all do.
And she is at no risk of being canceled by Team Blue.
That's not the point.
Okay.
The point, this is the same flaw that exists in our system of elections for members of the executive and legislative branch, right? Where you get an opportunity as somebody is trying to get into the office to get concessions from them, right? That you then hope will bind them once they reach the office. It doesn't work at all.
Right.
Okay? It's bullshit. But the point is, we still labor under
an independent judicial branch. Independent.
Of course, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But the reason that we are having this conversation is that she was asked a question designed to basically get her to paint herself into one corner or another, right? I don't think if she was...
I guess I would be very pleased to see people paint themselves into the corner of reality when it's so freaking unambiguous.
Of course you would. And the other side would be very glad to watch anybody who paints themselves into the obvious corner be emulated so that...
But she won't be.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is the opportunity to create a system of penalties and rewards designed to constrain somebody. This is the worst possible place to try to constrain somebody because the court is designed not to allow it. But it doesn't mean that that's not the game that's being played, or that she is going to be used as an example for others who are not in the same context. And so
that may be it, because I honestly, I'm just not buying. I'm not buying the argument otherwise, because it feels like usually there's going to be a gotcha moment, a series of gotcha moments, and it's going to be like, if you say the thing we know you're thinking, then we're not going to confirm.
Right.
And it's the opposite. It's the opposite situation here.
Right. But my point is,
like, she'd be more. I mean, I think she will be confirmed, but she'd be more guaranteed to confirm if she just state the obvious.
I don't know what would happen if she stated the obvious.
And we're arguing about the most basic thing that toddlers recognize.
Right. But this is my point. It's the sophistry, right? And the right answer to sophistry is, come on, Senator, you know what a woman is. We all do, right? That's the right answer to the question.
No, but then the senator is going to say, well, then define it for me.
No,
it's
no.
not
And
going to
then,
give her
the point is, there is no legitimate reason to ask for such a definition. Of course, I'm capable of defining it, as are you, as is anyone in this room. But the entire idea that anything hinges on the ability to define obvious things, right, is evidence that something with this process has gone seriously awry. And so my point is, look, you and I are now dragged into a conversation where we as biologists are weighing in on what a woman is, right? That's dumb. Now, I don't think we have a choice about it, right? Because especially in light of the fact that she invoked biologists. And I think this is legitimate. She, too, will have seen biologists on Twitter or YouTube or wherever claiming that this is ambiguous and sex isn't the simple thing we once thought it was. And all of the stuff that we have seen, right? That's because, like language, science is not robust to sophistry. It's not robust to pressure campaigns designed to unmake reality for political reasons, which is why we are having this fight in the first place. And so the simple answer is, this is really as simple as you thought it was. Yes, there are interesting things that happen in other creatures. Yes, there are interesting errors that happen in human development. None of it changes the basics here at all. Anybody who says that it does change the basics is motivated by something else, which may well be fear. It may be fear of what happens if they say the obvious. And so they may be doing exactly the wrong thing, and they may be, reneging on their agreement with the rest of us and pretending that something is complicated that isn't. But the trick is, how do we get back to a place where we aren't compelled to engage sophists and we do not empower people to claim anything they don't want to answer is sophistry? In other words, what we need is a good faith environment in which only sophistry is dismissed on this basis, but sophistry is reliably dismissed so that we don't get dragged into taking apart civilization because somebody's got a bunch of gotcha questions that we're going to struggle to answer simply.
Do you have an answer? How do we get back to that place?
Well, I think we need to recognize that.
And then I want to talk about tortoises.
That it's happening. Well, before you get to tortoises, I want to point out
But no, answer my question first. You said, how do we get back? You asked the question, how do we get back to a place where I guess we are not obligated to respond to sophists because they are at risk of burning down civilization? Obviously, it's a big question, but do you have the beginning of an answer?
Yeah, I got the beginning of an answer. Yeah. The beginning of an answer is this is a matter of a social contract where those of us who are dependent on civilization have to recognize that above all else, this must hold. That if we empower sophists... What must hold? That sophistry does not have to be answered in order to proceed, right? And the point is that
but that's gameable. That's sophistry. I don't have to address that.
My point is,
right?
What you need is, let's say, Democrats and Republicans to agree that the Republic will fail if sophists are allowed to steer the conversation, and in fact, every conversation, which they are now doing, right? And so the basic point is, we may not be able to agree on anything else, but we should agree on this principle. Right? That sophistry does not require an answer, and that the abuse of the claim that something is sophistry is a problem. And there's got to be some no man's land.
Devil's in the details in terms of operationalization, though.
No, it's not, because the point is we all know what a woman is. And anybody who can't say that they do at this moment in history has failed on the agreement. And anybody who says we all know what a woman is, there may be some nuances that I'm not schooled enough to understand, but nonetheless.
Okay, but we can't all provide definitions of electronic versus electric.
No, that's a case where specialists face this issue.
So there's a lot of space in between there where some people will say you're just engaging in sophistry, and other people say, like, oh, I really legitimately just am not paying attention to that thing.
Right, so then we need an agreement on that, which is to say that sophistry does not require an answer. And there's some gray area where we can't tell quite whether something is sophistry, and those things probably do require an answer. We need to err in the direction of answering, but there's a point at which you've gone far enough that you have indicted yourself. And I want to give an example of this, okay? A Twitter thread showed up. A friend of ours pointed, I think you probably saw it, but pointed us to it in a shared chat. Zach, do you want to put up the, what name. It's Cherie Becker. Cherie Becker, somebody I've never heard of before. She is apparently a PhD. I think she's a professor in Bath, England.
Can you embiggen it?
And
I have not seen this.
Generated a thread this week that I want to be careful with it, okay? Because
I have seen this.
The point in
But
this,
some people could not see it because they are listening.
They are listening, all right? I will describe it. She has a 20-tweet thread in which she lays out the argument that women's sports were not generated to protect women from male competition, but exactly the opposite. That in fact, men did not want competition from women, and women's sports were invented to protect men.
That women had started encroaching on men's sports, and they, of course, were just kicking ass and taking names because that's what you do when you're a superhero. Right. And then the men were like, patriarchy, let's make women's sports so the women can't continue to beat us.
Right.
That's the argument.
That's the argument. But this is a 20-tweet thread. Well, I want to be careful and not do that thing, because it is quite clear that, it's Becker. Yeah. That Cherie Becker is no dummy. Mm-hmm. And this thread is actually really impressive, right? If you set somebody the job, here is a wrong argument. I want you to lay out the best case you can for this wrong argument. You would come up with something like she's come up with here, right? It's not without evidence. She's got examples of places where she may even be right? Where, things like skeet shooting, right? The advantages that males have athletically may not have any implication in skeet shooting, or they may. I don't really know.
Look, and I've written about it. In fact, I was interviewed by the BBC a couple of years ago about the advantages that women may have in extreme long distance running, like 50-mile and longer races. And, it may not be an advantage. It may be an extremely small sample size with one or two extraordinary female athletes. But there also could be reasons that extraordinary physical endurance, like women have to endure in childbirth, could allow for greater capacity in some athletics.
Right. And there's even a way in which we can take the logic that underlies how men and women became different, and we should probably go into that logic, and it might select for exactly that, right?
Absolutely.
So
you should expect that there will be places where physically, if not by burst speed or strength, that women will do better at some tasks, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in any case, my point is the temptation when looking at a thread like this is, come on. And that's right in one way. But, oh, come on, you're a dummy and that's dumb isn't right. The argument is actually really well architected. And that's the problem with sophistry.
So that's your point here, is that is whether or not Dr. Becker knows that that's what she's doing. She is engaging in extraordinarily high level sophistry.
Extraordinarily high level. And it's really important that you have a right not to respond to this. Now, on Twitter, you can just not respond. But the point is, her argument is one that the fact is I looked at this thing and I was expecting it to be nonsense, right? And I can tell where the bodies are buried in her argument. She's got 3 examples of places where women actually were threatening to men in some way. One of them being skeet shooting. I've forgotten another one, which was like skeet shooting, where physical strength was irrelevant. And then one of them had to do with a threat in football, where women obviously are not capable of competing with men in football, but they were competing for attention. I think men were at war and women started playing football. And so, who knows what the truth of this example is, but it's obviously not a case where female athletic prowess was a threat to men. It's obviously just sort of loosely in the same neighborhood, right? And then she uses the endurance. And certainly,
I did not read through. I don't know the examples you're talking about, except by virtue of you saying them just now. But, this sounds like a caricature, but men are at war, so women start their own football league and they start playing football. That's a little questionable. I feel like women would start a different sports league, but okay, fine. yeah, the men come back. They're like, okay, ladies, you can have yours and we're going to have ours. Like, of course they would. And would that sound paternalistic to many people? Sure. But is it actually better for everyone? Uh-huh.
Yeah. And even if it's not, the point is none of these are a demonstration for the thing she appears to be advancing as an argument, which is that actually the difference in physical prowess isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And the point is, men were threatened. And so they created women's sports to keep them out of their leagues, which is not true. Right. But the overarching point is, look, sophists are not inherently dumb. In fact, years ago, I was prone to look up who the sophists were because this is obviously...
You mean the actual, like the Greek sophists?
Yeah, the Greek sophists. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the sophists were tutors. Right. And in some sense, I don't know the true story, but it's sort of, look, in debate, right, in like high school and college debate.
Which you did.
Which I did. Mm-hmm. The whole point is we are going to hand you a position. It's like being a lawyer, right? Somebody walks through your door, and whether their side of the argument is the one that you would naturally fall to, you're going to advocate it. So, so the point is, you don't know, going into a round, you flip a coin to see who's affirmative and who's negative. And the point is you deploy all your arguments and, you may know where the bodies are buried. You know how you'd argue.
It's about argument and evidence, not about underlying reality.
Right. So they may have been very good tutors. I don't know. Right. But the point is, A, they were hired guns. They were hired to teach. And the sophistry was about nonsense arguments that were high quality. Right. And so anyway, civilization cannot be allowed to fall because of sophistry. And I think the deepest point, which you and I have about male and female, which is really hard without the benefit of, a classroom and people returning week after week to make, is that this has nothing to do with people. Right?
Right. Well, this is, as I mentioned, however, 20 minutes ago or so, like, some of the people who call themselves postmodernists make this error. And I don't actually know to what degree it's just an obvious bastardization of some of the core interesting principles in postmodernism, of which there are a few. But you see these arguments that basically, like, until there was a word for a thing, the thing did not exist. Right. And I've seen that construction a few places by people who are being serious, who really, it's... If that isn't a religious position, I don't know what is. You really think it took human naming of the thing to make the thing exist? Well, then that's actually the point at which I'm not sure how to proceed in talking to you, because you do not appear to believe in an underlying objective reality. Do we know what that underlying objective reality is? In the case of male and female, yes, we do. But in the case of overall, no. Is science the best method we have for getting a better and ever better approximation of the truth of the reality? Yes, it is. Do we have missteps? Yes, we do. Do we certainly believe some things now which will turn out to not be true? Yes, we do. But is there an objective reality which we can aspire to understand? Yes or no? This is maybe the only question that you could ask me, or that I could ask a person. If they say no, like, I think I'm out then. I just don't know what to do with you. If you really don't think there's an objective reality, what is the basis of any of the conversation? Right.
There's nothing to be done.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's an argument that can be deployed as sophistry too.
Of course. Yes.
Right.
And it is.
And it is.